common wisdom on the Massachusetts Senate race is that Massachusetts voters rejected the idea of universal health care. The common wisdom in this case is totally wrong. Massachusetts, as you know, already has essentially universal health care. The Washington Post just polled Massachusetts voters. The vast majority of them said they like their state's universal health care system. 68% said so. Even more interesting, a majority of people who voted for Scott Brown say they like their universal health care system. 51%. So when you hear people say that the Massachusetts Senate race was a rejection of the idea of universal health care, that's actually provably, demonstrably, factually false. The relevant extrapolatable fact that national politicians can glean from Massachusetts is that once you pass something like health reform, it can no longer be some caricature like Obamacare anymore. It instead becomes people's health care coverage, something that they're very likely to like and to be willing to fight tooth and nail to keep it. And they will probably remember who gave it to them, which politically is why Republicans are so desperate to stop national health reform and why Democrats would be so dumb to give away their once-in-a-generation opportunity to get it. Joining us now is Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation. Chris, thanks for being here. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too, Rachel.
Give us the bottom line here. From your reporting, how intent are Democrats on passing health reform? Are they going to let this get away from them?
Okay, I think that there has been real movement in the House to coalesce around a real intent to pass it. The first thing that happened was there was a lot of pressure on the House to pass the Senate bill, and the House said, we don't have the votes. I talked to people today. Someone said, I've only heard 3 members in our entire caucus say they'd pass the Senate bill as it stands. Someone else told me there's no more than 50 votes to pass the Senate bill. So that's out of the question. The strategy that everyone is coalescing around and is pretty strong in the House is this reconciliation patch, right? So the Senate passes a small package that amends the Senate bill through reconciliation, and then the House passes something similar, and then it goes to the president. And there is real momentum for that on the House side. On the Senate side, things look a little tougher.
In terms of what would have to be in the small reconciliation package, the thing that would have to pass before the House could pass the Senate bill, how small is that package? What would have to be in it?
So there's 2 things there's basically 3 things that you have to use to craft that list of essentially amendments, right? The first is, what are the substantive changes you feel are really necessary to the bill? The second are, what gets you to 218 votes? And then the third tricky thing is, which of those things can procedurally move through what's called the Byrd rule, which is the sort of controlling procedural rule about what can go in reconciliation, what can't. So the big things on the agenda are the excise tax, right? This is something that you're just not going to get the House to vote for. They're going to have to amend it along the lines of how they did in the conference committee before everything went down in Massachusetts. There's also the question of national exchanges as opposed to state-run exchanges. There's a question of the subsidy level. Now, it looks plausible that all of those things could make it through the Byrd rule and be in reconciliation.
And what's the likelihood that those 3 things, say, if we had those 3 things, the national versus state exchanges, the excise tax issue, and the level of subsidy, let's say it was that, how hard is it going to be to get 50 votes for that in the Senate?
I don't think. I mean, I don't think it's going to be that hard to get 50 votes. It's really this kind of interesting pacing and momentum issue, which is to say, once the ball gets rolling, once everyone gets behind in the Senate, committed to the reconciliation process, I don't think you would lose 10 votes, or I guess 9 votes now in the caucus on those specific amended changes. I think everybody, you can get the 50 votes you need. The question is there the leadership right now internally in the Senate to make this start happening ASAP? And that's the thing that I've gotten really sort of disturbing signals on from the people I talked to today on the Senate side, who said, look, our caucus leadership is basically saying nothing about this. I mean, they didn't say anything about it today in the caucus lunch. They're not getting any direction from leadership. On the House side, there really is leadership. In fact, they just met just a few minutes ago on the House side. So there's a real difference between the 2 houses. What has to happen in the Senate needs to show good faith in that they're going to move this through reconciliation, and the sooner the better.
Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation. The only thing that makes me feel like this might ultimately happen is that we're able to talk this specifically about how it will happen if it does.
Yes.
I appreciate it, Chris. Thanks a lot for your help.
Thank you, Rachel.